Welcome to Comic Construction.
Let's check out the build, art, and story of G.I. Joe Compendium 2, written by Larry Hama, with art by Rod Whigham, Herb Trimpe, Ron Wagner, Mike Zeck, and many others. This book is published by Image Comics. This trade paperback is 6 5/8 by 10 3/16 inches and has 1,224 pages, so it's a rather thick volume. It's very light because of the paper type they used. The cover has 4-color printing on an uncoated stock with a spot varnish for the logo. And that spot varnish is used on the spine for the art element and the art elements on the back. I've got the Michael Golden cover because it's a classic cover. This was direct market only. The book does have scored hinges, which work really well. It's hard to open the cover beyond that hinge, and that holds the book together really nicely when you're reading it. The paper is a fairly standard newsprint. Definitely a step down from some of the recent manga hardcover books or some of the nicer DC Deluxe editions like The Golden Age or V for Vendetta. I do wonder how this paper will age. And I also noticed that there is gutter loss due to the page count, specifically in text pieces. It doesn't seem to affect the comic pages, but those prose pieces in the yearbooks detailing what happened in the cartoon that year are kind of hard to read. The art is really nice throughout. G.I. Joe's always featured some very classic comic artists, and I took a lot of this for granted as a kid, but seeing it as an adult, it is strikingly beautiful. There are quite a few Mike Zeck covers throughout, and I've always adored his art, so that's a real treat. As a kid, I thought the interiors by Rod Whigham and Herb Trimpe were good, but now I see how masterful these artists were at storytelling. It's truly striking. There's one of my favorite covers by Mike Zeck for issue 52. But as important as the art is to a comic, I wouldn't bother with a 1,200-page art book, so let's talk about the story by Larry Hama. I still think of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, as more of a comic than a toy line because of Larry Hama's writing. This volume weaves in G.I. Joe plus the G.I. Joe Special Missions issues into one whole. In case you don't know, Special Missions was sold as a more grounded, realistic take on military stories, and it frequently tied in with the main G.I. Joe book, but not always. Sometimes it was just kind of telling its own stories that happened during the main title. All of my favorite single issue stories are in the first volume, but there are a few standouts and what I consider the best multi-parter in this volume. G.I. Joe number 55 sees Grunt deciding to leave the team to become an engineer so that he can start building rather than destroying. Grunt was my first G.I. Joe figure, but his characterization in the comics was pretty boring. But this storyline, this was special. And as he leaves the pit for the final time, Clutch shows up to tell him goodbye. I really enjoy that moment between two of the original 13. It's just a really great moment. And Clutch did start out the series as a jerk, but becomes one of the best characters in the book pretty quickly. Special Missions number 2 sees two G.I. Joe teams working on a mystery involving a Nazi bomber and a war criminal in hiding in Argentina. Clutch has to deal with the war criminal personally, which hits hard because his Jewish grandmother was interred in a prison camp during the Holocaust. This characterization is so great and goes a long way into making the world just feel more rooted and real. Special Missions number 4 is also a great issue. This time we get to see Lifeline, a pacifist on the team who is constantly ridiculed for his beliefs, and we get to experience his strength of conviction. This book was such an inspiration to me as a kid. And then finally we get to the best multi-part story that was ever done in a G.I. Joe comic, and that's G.I. Joe number 61, which continues through Special Missions and the main title, wrapping up in G.I. Joe 67. Stalker leads Quick Kick, Outback, and Snowjob on a secret mission. It's the kind of mission that if you're killed or caught, you will be disavowed. Of course, the mission goes sideways. Quick Kick is injured, and the team is captured, except for Outback, who's able to make an escape. The story is told from multiple viewpoints, including the POWs as well as Outback, who eventually gets back to the pit and has to deal with something like survivor's guilt and being harassed by Leatherneck for leaving his team behind. I don't want to ruin the ending because it's must-read material. I don't think I'll get the next volume because the main book gets sillier as it moves into the Ninja Force era. But this volume has a lot of must-read stories.
Thanks for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and share with a friend.